Some heroes don't raise their voices, they simply hold the line. Harrison Ford hadn't stepped into a classroom in decades, but when his granddaughter called without saying a word, he understood. Not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't. That silence carried a weight only a rescue pilot would recognize. Someone needed lifting, and no one else was moving. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from, and if this story moves you, don't forget to subscribe. A woman stepped through the front entrance of Crestwood High. Her boots made no sound against the speckled tile, and her long, dark coat held the last crease of careful folding. The hallway stretched out ahead, sterile, fluorescent, lined with lockers that had seen too many years and too little paint. No one looked up for long. A few students noticed the new adult presence, clocked her as another substitute, maybe temporary, definitely forgettable. Dena didn't mind. She didn't expect an audience. She walked with the stillness of someone who already knew where she was going. Past the trophy case, past the wall mural with chipped edges, past 3 seniors arguing under their breath about lunch money. Her pace never changed. Room 3B waited, quiet and untouched, the nameplate missing, a faint rectangle of tape residue left behind. She paused at the threshold, hand on the door, a breath. Then she stepped inside. The room smelled of dry markers and air recycled too many times. One of the overhead lights buzzed in a way that was more suggestion than function. Dena didn't flinch. She walked to the front, set her canvas bag gently on the desk, and began. One chair was nudged 2 inches off its axis. She moved it. Another was crooked at an angle that would have bent a student's neck. She rotated it. Her movements weren't hurried. They were precise, measured. Like someone tuning an instrument before a performance no one else had been invited to hear. She moved to the wall clock above the whiteboard. Its red second hand lagged behind. She pressed the reset button. The hands jumped, then settled. Exactly on the second. From her bag, she removed a thin piece of chalk, unusual in a school full of markers, and wrote 5 words across the center of the board, careful and deliberate. Discipline is quieter than strength. She stepped back, looked at it for a moment, then placed the chalk down and opened the top drawer of the desk. Inside, she set a single item, a small silver pocket watch, its surface dulled with time, edges worn smooth by decades of use. It didn't beep or tick audibly, but it felt heavier than its size allowed. She paused, one hand on its closed face, before pulling it away. A younger teacher passing by the open door glanced in. "Hey," he said, squinting. "That's a rescue pilot model, isn't it? They don't make those anymore. Heard it was standard issue back when." His voice faded when Dena offered no response, just the faintest nod. The bell rang. Students drifted in, loose-shouldered and half asleep. A girl with earbuds tucked beneath her hoodie. A boy with a chipped skateboard balanced awkwardly under his desk. No one sat up straighter. No one asked her name. To them, she was just another adult in the cycle. Show up, give handouts, disappear before spring. Dena didn't introduce herself right away. She stood off to the side, eyes sweeping gently across the room. Not judging, not searching. Just noticing, taking inventory of how the room breathed. A boy in the back whispered something to the kid next to him. "She's new, probably soft." They chuckled. She heard. She didn't blink. Instead, she walked to the nearest desk, adjusted it by a centimeter, then another. A girl up front glanced at her, puzzled by the exactness, by the silence. Dena finally turned to face the class. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was low, grounded, not loud but impossible to ignore. "I'm Dena. I'll be your English teacher this year." A few murmurs answered. Most students said nothing. Dena didn't mind. She looked at the clock. It ticked cleanly. 8:06. The class began, and though no one noticed, something had already shifted. The rules of Crestwood weren't written in handbooks. They lived in glances, in how loud someone laughed and who looked away first, in which names got whispered in the locker rooms and which ones got shouted across courtyards like a challenge. Ryder Langston didn't need to say he ran things. Everyone just understood. He moved through the school like he owned the air between classes. His voice always one notch too loud. His stride never quite a run, but never slow enough to look aimless. That morning, he stood just past the second-floor stairwell, leaned casually against a row of lockers. One leg crossed over the other, jaw tilted to catch the light, hands in his hoodie like he had nothing to prove. Cole stood beside him, broader, louder, the kind who laughed first and thought second. Seth was nearby, half in their orbit, half apart, lean and quiet, his eyes already scanning the hallway for something to twist. Dena walked down that same hallway, holding a stack of essays, her pace unchanging. As she approached, Ryder pushed off the lockers, stretched as if by coincidence, and took one slow step into her path. His shoulder brushed hers, not hard, but enough to make the stack of papers in her arms tilt sideways, pages fluttering to the floor like startled birds. She paused, just long enough to watch them settle. Ryder smirked, didn't break stride. "Oops," he said over his shoulder, voice casual, practiced. Dena crouched, gathering the pages without looking up. Her hands moved calmly, precisely. Cole chuckled, not even pretending to hide it. Seth didn't say a word. He didn't have to. That wasn't his role today. Down in the quad later, Cole knocked a younger student's backpack off a bench with the tip of his boot. "Seats taken," he said. The kid didn't argue. He just nodded, picked up his things, and walked away like it was normal. The gym teacher, Roland, saw it from the edge of the bleachers. He adjusted his cap and turned toward the field. The moment passed like it always did, witnessed, but never spoken of. Dena watched from the shade, a book open on her lap but untouched. Her gaze followed the exchange, then dropped back to the page, even though she hadn't turned it once in 10 minutes. The culture at Crestwood didn't demand cruelty, it just rewarded certainty. Ryder and his crew weren't the smartest or even the most athletic. They were simply the ones who never blinked first. They smiled in photos with the principal, made teachers laugh when observed, gave just enough effort to pass. The school had learned to work around them. Teachers whispered about them in break rooms but never filed formal complaints. Parents sent emails but stopped following up. The system wasn't broken, it just didn't care to fix what didn't explode. Later that afternoon, Dena returned to the teacher's lounge, a space cluttered with chipped mugs and half-hearted motivational posters. She placed her folder on the table, then walked to the far corner, where a small shelf held a collection of staff photos, plaques, and things no one dusted anymore. Among them, slightly tilted, was a black-and-white photograph in a thin wooden frame. A man stood beside an old helicopter, one foot resting on a landing skid. His jacket whipped in the mountain wind. Sunglasses shaded his eyes, but his stance was unmistakable, quiet, prepared, grounded. Dena looked at it for a moment, just a moment, then reached up and straightened the frame by a half-inch. No one else in the lounge paid attention. One teacher scrolled through her phone, another reheated soup that already smelled like surrender. No one asked about the man in the picture, no one recognized the face, but Dena did. And when she returned to room 3B, she moved one desk half a step to the left. It aligned perfectly with the center of the board. Her fingers rested on the surface a second longer than necessary, then released. The hallway outside buzzed with noise that didn't reach her. Inside, the air stayed still, not peaceful, just waiting. The cafeteria on Thursdays always smelled faintly of burnt cheese and something trying too hard to be chicken. Students moved through the lunch line like they were clocking in for a job they didn't remember applying for. In the far corner, near the vending machines, a freshman balanced his tray awkwardly while scanning the tables for a spot not already claimed by invisible lines of territory. He found one briefly, took 2 steps forward. That's when Seth extended his leg just slightly, almost lazily. The boy tripped. His tray tipped forward. Pasta, carton milk, half a cookie, everything hit the tile with a wet slap. No one laughed, not loudly. A few heads turned, some winced, most just looked away. The boy crouched, trying to gather the mess with a few napkins from his pocket. His shoulders hunched not from embarrassment, but from expectation. He already knew no one was going to help. Dena watched from across the room, sitting alone, her own lunch untouched. She didn't stand immediately. She closed her book, walked calmly toward the mess. She didn't speak, didn't scold. Just knelt beside the boy and began helping him stack the discarded items back onto the tray. She used the same napkins he did. When they finished, She placed the ruined tray on top of a trash bin and nodded once to the boy, who still hadn't looked her in the eye. Then she turned and walked away. No announcement, no lesson, just presence. Later that day, the library was nearly silent. Pages turned, fingers tapped keyboards. A girl in the back corner doodled in the margins of a science packet. Dena moved through the aisles with the kind of quiet that didn't ask to be noticed. She paused near the window, adjusted one of the blinds by a single slat, then returned to her table. She didn't open her laptop. She just sat for a moment, listening to the rhythm of stillness. Back in room 3B, the second bell rang. Students dragged their bodies into place, half awake, half bored, all waiting. Ryder leaned back in his chair, one leg hooked under the desk, arms crossed. Cole whispered something crude under his breath. Seth tapped on his phone like he was keeping time with a beat only he could hear. Dena walked in, unbothered. She adjusted a desk near the front, then moved to the board. The quote from the morning still lingered, faded from the previous day's chalk. She erased it in clean strokes and wrote another. This one was shorter, more pointed. She turned. That's when the paper airplane hit her shoulder. Not hard, just enough to be noticed. It fluttered to the floor beside her. Dena paused, bent down slowly, picked it up, unfolded it, one word. Written in bold black ink, too careful to be spontaneous, worthless. She looked at it for a second, not long, folded it back into shape, walked to her desk, opened the top drawer, placed the airplane inside, closed it. The students waited for a reaction. None came. Instead, she opened the second drawer, removed a small cloth-wrapped bundle, unwrapped it gently like something fragile lived inside. It was a notebook, plain, worn, edges slightly frayed. She placed it on the desk, opened to the inside cover. There, almost faded with time, was a handwritten line. Not every hero gets a medal. Initials beneath, HF. Dena ran her finger once across the letters, not to remember, but to anchor herself. Then she closed the notebook and placed it back in the drawer. No one in the room saw, no one needed to. The lesson continued. Words about unreliable narrators and fractured perspectives. Some students took notes. Others stared through the window as if the sky offered something more useful than analysis. Ryder smiled to himself like he'd won something. Seth kept tapping his screen, but something in the air had shifted, not loudly, just enough to make the silence feel heavier. Dena's tone never changed. Her posture never faltered. But when she wrote the final sentence on the board that day, her hand didn't hesitate. And though none of them said it out loud, a few students noticed her presence differently, not soft, not strict, just steady. The bell rang. Chairs scraped, backpacks zipped. Ryder walked out first, laughing at a joke only he found funny. Dena stayed behind, erased the board slowly, methodically, until not even the chalk dust remained. Then she reached into her drawer once more, touched the folded paper airplane, and let it rest where it was, not as proof, not as weakness, but as record, because sometimes the things not confronted immediately are the ones most remembered when they finally rise. The hallway was nearly empty. After-school light poured in at a low angle, brushing the lockers in long, golden streaks. Footsteps echoed with no urgency. The school had exhaled its final breath for the day. Dena stepped out of room 3B, holding a small stack of papers under one arm and a folder under the other. Her posture was the same as always, upright, deliberate, not rushed. Her shoes made no sound. At the far end of the hall, Ryder leaned against the wall, flanked by Cole and Seth. They had been waiting, not openly, not in ambush, just close enough for timing. Seth held his phone angled low, pretending to scroll. Cole cracked his knuckles. Ryder smiled when he saw her. She passed the stairwell. Ryder pushed off the wall and started walking, just enough speed to suggest playfulness, just enough distance to avoid drawing early attention. He moved in step with her for 3 beats. Then his hand reached out and caught the hem of her dress in a swift, downward tug, sharp, intentional. The fabric lifted for a second, just a second. A sound escaped someone nearby, not a word, just the startled breath of a witness who hadn't planned to be one. Dena's folder dropped, papers scattered like white feathers on the tile. Ryder kept walking. Cole clapped once, then howled with laughter. Seth slipped the phone back into his jacket. Two students near the corner lockers turned and quickly turned away again. Another teacher shut their classroom door without looking. No one said anything. Dena knelt to pick up her papers, one at a time, slowly, carefully. Her hands didn't shake. She didn't search for faces. She didn't speak. When the last paper was back in the folder, she stood. Her eyes flicked once to the stairwell. The boys were gone. She returned to her room, closed the door behind her with a soft, decisive click. Room 3B was dark now, lit only by the last blue light of the day filtering through the blinds. She sat at her desk, not stiff, not collapsed, just still. Her gaze settled on the board. Faint lines of that morning's quote still visible. Discipline is quieter than strength. Her phone buzzed. Once, the screen lit up. Grandpa calling. She didn't hesitate, picked it up, put it to her ear. "Are you all right?" His voice was quiet, like it had traveled across mountains to find her. She nodded before remembering he couldn't see it. "Yes," she said, one word, flat, true. A pause followed, the kind that holds more weight than a sentence. "You know what to do." "I do. That's my girl." The call ended. Dena set the phone down face up. The screen faded to black. Across town, on a dozen screens, a 6-second clip began to circulate. The hallway, Dena's back, the yank. The stutter step forward, a flash of skin, a folder hitting the floor, Ryder's grin. The video came with a caption, "Our English teacher caught some air." Within the hour, it had tens of thousands of views, by nightfall more. It found its way into group chats, private stories, muted hallway TVs. But in room 3B, none of that noise penetrated. Dena rose from her chair, walked slowly to the cabinet in the corner. She unlocked it, pulled the door open, and paused. Inside, neatly folded, were a few personal items: a thermos, a training manual with pages curled from time, a pair of shoes wrapped in an old towel. She took the shoes out, sat with them. Unwrapped them like a memory, leather worn smooth at the heels. Soles darkened with years of repetition, not battle shoes, not performance shoes, shoes of habit, of readiness. She ran a cloth gently over the surface, not to clean them, to return to them. Outside the room, a janitor pushed a cart past the door. Mops clinked, wheels squeaked. Dena didn't move. The silence in the room wasn't defeat, it wasn't fear, it was alignment, not revenge, not retreat, preparation. Something had been taken, but something older had just been woken up. The conference room smelled like old carpet and unspoken blame. The blinds were half drawn, the air too still. A table sat at the center like a witness stand, surrounded by chairs that felt more like positions than seats. At the head sat the principal, lips pursed, fingers steepled. Across from him sat Dena, hands folded in her lap, gaze steady, unmoved. She had spoken only once since entering. "Thank you for the opportunity to be here." Not defensive, not contrite, just present. To her left sat Ryder's mother, blazer pressed tight across her shoulders, jaw locked like she had been preparing for this moment for years. Her voice, when she spoke, was loud enough to fill the corners of the room, but practiced enough to seem calm. "This woman should not be allowed near children," she said. "She humiliated my son, endangered his emotional well-being, and now she's the subject of viral videos. Is this the kind of image Crestwood wants to uphold?" Ryder lounged 2 chairs down, phone in hand, scrolling without shame. His legs were stretched long under the table, ankle crossed over the other. He didn't look at anyone, just smirked quietly at something on the screen. Another parent, seated further down, chimed in with a softer voice. "We've heard from other students that she doesn't engage, that she intimidates. The classroom is supposed to feel safe." Dena didn't interrupt, didn't correct them. The principal glanced in her direction, almost hoping for a rebuttal that could shift the tone. But she offered none, only silence, silence that filled the space like a challenge. The door behind them clicked once, knuckles against wood. A slow, deliberate knock. The principal frowned. "We're in session," he called. The door opened anyway. A man stepped inside. Hair silver, coat simple, eyes quiet but sharp. He didn't look hurried, didn't look angry. He looked grounded, like weathered rock, like someone who'd seen worse storms than this and learned to walk through them. He didn't introduce himself, didn't need to. Dena looked over once, briefly, then back to the table. The room had shifted. Ryder's mother blinked, then stared. Her voice, when it came, was not the same as before. "Oh my God," she said, almost under her breath. "You're that pilot." The man didn't move. She stood now, slower than she expected. You flew the rescue chopper, Sierra Nevada, winter of 2009. I was stuck with my daughter in a ravine, no signal, no help. The temperature was dropping fast. You landed on bare rock. You carried her on your back." She stopped speaking. The words ran out. The principal looked between them, unsure of what he was witnessing. The man nodded once. Ryder's mother sat down again. Her hands, folded tightly in her lap, trembled just slightly. Then the principal spoke, voice low, uncertain. "You were a rescue pilot." The man finally answered. His voice was calm, deep, unshaken. "Retired now, but yes." "And you're related to Ms. Dena." "She's my granddaughter." Another silence, but this one felt different. It wasn't weightless. It pressed on the shoulders of everyone in the room. Ryder shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his phone screen now dark in his hand. "I never got to thank you properly," his mother said, almost a whisper now. "They said, if you hadn't gotten there when you did." He nodded again, said nothing. The principal adjusted his tie. "We didn't know." "You weren't supposed to," the man said. He turned to Dena for a moment, not a glance of pity, not protection. Just acknowledgement, then to Ryder, and finally to his mother. "I saved your daughter once," he said. "Doesn't mean I'll stay quiet while your son tries to destroy mine." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Then he stepped back toward the door, paused, one last look at the table. "Some rescues," he said, "don't come with helicopters. Some just take being willing to stand when no one else will." And then he left. No dramatic closing. No applause, just the quiet hiss of the door as it shut behind him. Inside the room, no one said anything for a long time. Not the principal, not the parents, not even Ryder. Dena remained seated, still and calm. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply waited. And this time, the silence belonged to her. The silence that followed Harrison Ford's exit didn't feel empty. It felt earned, thick like fog, but clear in its meaning. No one reached for their phones. No one looked at the clock. The conference room simply sat in the quiet, breathing in the weight of what had just happened. Ryder's mother had her eyes on the table now. Her fingers traced a circle along the grain, over and over, like she was trying to find her place again. The principal cleared his throat. Once, then again, still nothing came out. He looked across the room at Dena, then to the closed door where Harrison had just disappeared. And then he said, not loudly, it was 1992. His voice cracked on the year, not from emotion, but from memory that hadn't been touched in a long time. "I was flying training missions with the reserve unit, Sierra Foothills, weather turned, lost the left engine mid-descent. The chopper went down fast, hard. I don't remember the impact, just the sound, metal folding on itself, glass shattering inside my helmet. I was trapped, bleeding, smoke everywhere." He paused, not because he needed to, but because the next words were still too sharp. "They told me later the crew thought no one survived. They called off the search. Night fell. I was sure it was over." He looked up then, not at Dena, at the others. The parents, Ryder, but someone showed up, landed a private bird just past the ridge, got through without backup, pulled me from the wreckage, burned his own jacket trying to cut the harness. He didn't tell me his name. Just said, "We're not done yet." His voice broke a little then, not enough to make him seem weak, just enough to make everyone in the room stop breathing. I never forgot the way he looked at me when we lifted off. Like I owed someone more than just gratitude, like I owed it to the next person. Another silence stretched out, this one deeper. The principal exhaled slowly, sat back, looked at Dena. And when he did, there was something different in his face, not just recognition, respect. Across the room, Ryder no longer held his phone. His shoulders had curled in slightly, not slouched, but drawn back, as if trying to disappear into the fabric of his chair. His jaw moved once like he wanted to speak, but the words never formed. His face, once so sure of its place in every room, now looked smaller. He didn't look at Dena. He couldn't. Dena stood, not abruptly. She didn't shift her tone or clear her throat. She didn't need the room's permission. She looked once toward the principal, not to seek approval, just to acknowledge the moment. Then she turned toward the door. Her steps were the same as always, measured, soft, grounded. No one stopped her. As she reached the threshold, the principal called out, not loudly, just enough. His name, do you know it? Dena paused, hand on the doorframe. She didn't turn around, but her voice reached everyone. I always have. And then she left. The room stayed quiet after that. No resolutions, no apologies, just people sitting with what they now knew. The woman they tried to discredit was the granddaughter of the man who had once saved their lives, and none of them had seen it, because they hadn't been looking for honor in silence. They had only been listening for noise. The desks had been rearranged into a quiet horseshoe. Sunlight filtered in through half-open blinds, striping the floor in soft, uneven light. On the board, written in Dena's calm block print, were the words, "Literature doesn't change the world. It changes the person who does." No one commented on it. They just read it and sat down. Emily was third on the list. She held a thin binder to her chest, like a shield, fingers tight around the edges. When her name was called, she stood. Her voice wavered at first, not from fear exactly, but from how loud silence could feel when it was aimed at you. "I chose to respond to Jane Eyre," she said, "not because I liked it. Because it made me angry." A few students looked up at that. Emily opened the binder. Her notes shook slightly in her hands, but her voice grew steadier with each sentence. "I got tired of stories where girls survive by staying quiet. I wanted to write one where silence ends." She continued. Her words weren't loud, but they were clear, sharper than some had expected. Then, from the back of the room, Ryder leaned forward. "God," he muttered, just loud enough to cut the room. "You people act like every book's a trauma support group." The ripple moved fast. A few students glanced at Dena. One girl looked down, another smirked but didn't laugh. Dena didn't speak. Emily stopped mid-sentence. And then, before anyone else could say a word, a voice came from the second row. "Co-letter 1EA5Y is talking, you shut up." It wasn't shouted, it wasn't violent, it was just enough. The boy who said it, Daniel, small, usually quiet, always sat near the windows, didn't flinch. He didn't look at Ryder, he looked straight ahead, at Emily, and waited. The room went still. Ryder blinked, stood. His shoulders moved like he wanted to shrug it off, but something held him back. Maybe it was the way no one laughed with him. Maybe it was the way Dena didn't give him anything to fight against. No glare, no warning, just stillness, just her eyes. He held that moment for 3 full seconds, then turned, walked out of the room. No one followed, no one filmed, no one needed to. Emily looked down at her binder, then back up. Her voice didn't shake now. She picked up exactly where she left off. For the next 7 minutes, the room belonged to her. When she finished, she sat down to soft, honest applause, not polite, not forced, just present. Class moved on. At the end of the hour, as students packed their bags, Emily lingered. She didn't wait to be called. She just walked quietly to Dena's desk and placed a folded piece of paper on top. Then she left. Dena didn't open it right away. She waited until the room was empty. The handwriting was careful, small, one sentence. "I stayed because you didn't leave." Dena folded the note, slid it into her notebook without a word. Outside, the hall filled with footsteps and laughter and the scrape of backpacks. But inside room 3B, something quieter remained, something stronger than noise, something that wasn't there before, not a victory, something else, a shift. Room 3B was quiet before the sun fully touched the windows. Dust floated in angled beams, soft and slow, like the room was still deciding whether to wake. The desks had been pushed to the edges. The board was clean, no quote today. Just stillness, and on the back wall, newly fastened to the plaster just above eye level, was a small plaque. Wooden, no varnish, no embellishment. The edges were slightly uneven, as if cut by hand. And carved into its surface, in simple, shallow lettering, "You don't have to win, you just have to hold." The words didn't shout, they didn't ask to be noticed, but they stayed, right where they were meant to be. Dena stood beneath it for a moment, one hand resting lightly on the edge, fingers brushing the grain. She traced the final 2 initials carved into the bottom right corner. HF, the H curled just slightly, same shape as the one in the notebook she kept in her drawer. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. Her smile wasn't wide, but it was real, like a breath held too long finally released. The door creaked open. One student stepped in, then another, a girl in sneakers. A boy with a sweatshirt pulled over his head. No one asked where to sit. They didn't sit. They stood quietly, waiting. No one said the word training. No one mentioned discipline. They called it something else. A morning rhythm, a place to hold still. A place to keep balance. Dena turned from the plaque, bowed her head once. They began. Outside, the world moved like always. Traffic lights changed. Leaves shifted. Phones buzzed. But in this small, bright room, something had been reset. Not reversed, not erased, just realigned. And somewhere far from the building, on a quiet porch where wind rolled down from the hills, a man sat with a cup of coffee, not watching the news, not checking a phone, just breathing. He didn't need to be there. His work had already landed. If you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.